thank you so much for being here for episode number 2. This week, I sit down with Juliet Root, a transformative coach who helps her clients navigate their relationship with food and transform their lives from the inside out. Juliet and I talk about her own journey, following her curiosity to discover the link between trauma, feelings, nutrition, and fitness, and how to bring more awareness into our day-to-day lives. A quick note that right around the 30-minute mark, the oh-so-reliable Costa Rican power grid, just kidding, decided to cut out, and as a result, Juliet and I resumed our conversation only a couple of days later. It makes for a slightly awkward pause, but the conversation picks right up on the other side. Enjoy this episode with Juliet Root. Hello.
Hi there.
Hey, Juliet, how's it going?
It's going really well. How are you doing today?
Good. Nice to meet you. Thank you for joining me on my experimental podcast.
I'm very happy to be here. I love being on podcasts since I do so many where I'm the person interviewing. I'm like, yay, I get to be on a podcast.
Yeah, I feel you. I also kind of prefer to be the guest on the podcast rather than the host. So I'm glad I'm able to give you that gift today.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So I came to you because I want to share as much as I can about my own spiritual journey with this world, and getting healthy and nutrition and life coaching have all been things that have helped me along my own path. And your title of transformational coach is something that really grabbed my attention. I don't think I'd come across it anywhere else before, despite working with a life coach. So can you tell me a little bit more about the title itself and the kind of work that you do with your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. And I myself have gone through the whole journey of health, body, nutrition, transformation, therapy, all the things myself. So I can speak to that as well from a personal level of everything that I've tried. And it really started for me because I was a personal trainer. That was my first foray into health and wellness. And then from there, I went on to become a nutritionist, and particularly an integrative nutritionist, where I really saw food as a way of helping people heal from different physical ailments. And then from there, it turned into realizing that there were a lot of parallels between the way that people were dealing with their food and how they felt about their mental health, and their traumas started to come out. And I was not prepared for all of that. Like, wow, it's one thing to be able to tell people like, here's what works and here's a plan. And then another for someone to actually do that and to actually have a change in their life. And so from there, I went on to study the psychology of eating and get into the mindset piece of how does someone actually make that shift and take care of themselves, and how do you go underneath those layers of the mind. And that was really what led me into more of my spiritual practice in working with people. And from there, I went on to study energy healing. And so it was this kind of just whole, like, it was the body, the mind, and then the spirit. And that's the order that I take people through. And that's the transformation. And, we always start with the body because, this vessel we have is housing the soul. And so we have to look at that first. And then from there, we look at the layers of the mind and how that's interacting with the body. And then once you get to have all of those things in working order, then the spirit says, hello, I'm here and I'm feeling ready to do my job now because you're taking such better care of me. And it's really this beautiful trajectory that happens. And so that is the full transformation, really. And I didn't know really what else to call myself. I'm kind of like transformation and integrative healing coach is the kind of the two things that I toggle between. But before that, it was just a health coach. But this is way beyond just physical health. This is overall transformation. So that's how I kind of got to that title.
Mm-hmm. How long did it take you to go from like your expertise in nutrition to doing this full holistic approach?
11 years it's been of working with people with this. So yeah. But I took some time off. I was a co-owner of a business for a long time. So I really was only doing it very part-time. And so it's just been since February of 2021 that I went back to being full-time.
Okay.
Not even a year of doing it full-time again.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Yeah. So what does the work itself, how long does that take with your clients? How much time do you usually spend with them? What kind of exercises do you take them through? What is the general regimen?
Yeah, so it really is dependent upon the person. And I definitely don't have a one size fits all approach with even timing with someone. But what I have really recommended is it being a 12-week minimum for many people. And I'm very open to it being less than that, depending on the person. But what I found really works is 12 weeks, this 3-month period of every single week working together and then doing things when we're not together and supporting them in those little, home assignments that they need to do to really help them. Because, they're with me 1.5 hours maybe or less. And then the rest of the time they're doing their thing. So it's important that there are things that I support them with in between. And yes, so it's body, mind, and spirit work. So really the body part, I support people with their nutrition and their movement piece, just kind of making sure that foundational stuff is there. And we can get more into diet if that's something you do want to talk about, but there's so many nuances with it, but really it's just about meeting the person with where they're at. And many clients that I have struggle with food and their body and from years of programming, what they should eat, what they shouldn't eat, what they should look like, what they shouldn't look like. And so there's that piece of that, which is a big trust piece, kind of figuring out how do you trust your body and feel good about what you're putting in it. And then the mind part is I really work with people to teach them a lot about how the mind works. Because you've got, different components to yourself, right? You have the person who is talking in your head. You have the person who's seeing that and observing that. And who are those people? What's happening there? But, how do I become more in the observer seat so that I can support myself in making changes? And then the spiritual aspect, the energy aspect, that is a little, it's a little more of the invisible part that I can't explain with words. But that's my, I can basically just feel people's energy and kind of tap into like what they need and what they don't need in that moment. And there's a huge trauma piece to this that we can talk about, but pretty much every client I work with, it's really about unraveling some of that, like past trauma.
Absolutely.
Being able to
and I'm sure you'll agree, like trauma can be big trauma or small trauma, just small little micro things that happen, as a kid or as a teenager, or even as adult, that you can still be carrying in your body as well, even if it's not this, giant traumatic story.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's just understanding just how our minds work and, the subconscious mind and how we take things in from the time we're little, and even just giving language to that for people and explaining how that works is very freeing for many of us when we learn, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense now. And when things make sense, you feel less like a victim and more like you have the power, you can take your power back in that moment. So that's a really powerful part of all of this too, is just realizing how powerful we really are when we realize that we are not a product of our circumstances.
Yeah, I did a journaling class a few months ago, and there was a segment in there, I think it was 5 days straight of just writing little stories about trauma. And I never felt like I had a story of trauma, but once I started digging into it, it was just, I called it like short stories about micro traumas. And it was like all little instances where guy friends either betrayed me or did something that didn't feel good. And how for me that was just kind of normal and part of the story. But once I started writing about it, just so much more came out, and I could see how it influences my male friendships today and how I've struggled with masculinity in general.
Yeah, because it's this one or two or however many, what seemingly insignificant incidences that happen to us. But what happens is that we sort of tether away, and a piece of us says, "Oh, I'm just going to go over here now, and I don't want to come back out because there's a fear now around being that authentic version of yourself." It's learning when you learn that about yourself, then you can say, oh, okay, now I'm going to put trust back in, and I'm going to go back out there with the understanding that I am my caretaker. I can support myself. If these feelings start to come up, I can understand that these feelings, where they come from, and that it's not somebody else who's making me feel this way.
Yeah, absolutely. Something you said, were saying before, remind me of our daughter, Charlie. Well, both of our kids, they're very glutinous. And, you know, especially after dinner time, it feels like they could just stuff their faces with more and more food. Like, it doesn't matter what you would offer them, they would just eat it. And we try to, you know, have dinner and kind of be done with it. So we're not building this habit of taking sweets, you know, after you're finished dinner and right before bedtime. But we're trying to teach them to make the distinction between what their body actually needs and just what the mouth is kind of asking for. And we see them, you know, obviously they need a lot of time to learn these little lessons, but we can see them recognize, you know, sometimes just the mouth wants to change up the flavor and wants something sweet, but your body, it doesn't actually need it. It's actually full from the dinner you just had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's that insatiable part of us all, but especially with kids, because everything is so new and exciting. And they are in that place of, you know, that I believe they're under 7, right?
They are, yeah, 5 and 7.
Yeah, they're in that, like, that 0 to 7 stage is that really like powerful place in life where you're just a sponge and you're just taking it all in, and everything is very imaginative and experiential. So that insatiable nature in kids it's a beautiful thing. And yeah, just watching them be able to tap into their own intuition and like what their bodies need, they have more capacity to do that than I do in my 30s. So it's great to see children and how they're able to be like, I'm full, or I'm hungry, or this is what I need, or this is what I don't need.
Yeah, same. I mean, I'm still stuck in that phase, you know, 0 to 7 years old when it comes to food. I just love food, and it tastes so good, and it's such an enjoyable part of, you know, being alive and being a human. Like, you get to experience all of the flavors, and it does require some, you know, relearning, rewiring yourself to have a healthy relationship with it. Like, I've done my nights of like binging on salty food, then sweet food, salty food, sweet food, and it was never got really problematic, but I just enjoyed it so much. Like, I needed to stop that not so great habit and kind of rewire myself to really do it in a healthier way.
Yeah, well, food can be a real spiritual gateway for a lot of people. It was actually one of mine when I was 25. I had been really suffering with like going on diets and like restricting myself and over exercising from the time I was, 12 is when I believe I went on my first diet. And 14 is when I started working out. And it would never truly came from a place of like wanting to have better performance or athleticism. It really came from a lack, or feeling like I lacked confidence. And so I really did a lot of experimentation and tortured myself for so many years that it was when I was 25, when I was having a real issue with binge eating, where I could not stop eating at night, especially. And I would think about food all day long, and it was consuming to me. And then I would feel so shameful and guilty, and would exercise for hours the next day in order to, you know, burn it off, what I thought was burning it off. Right. And it was just this cycle that I was caught in. And that was one of the things that actually really got me into looking at myself on a deeper level for one of the first times, and going down a spiritual path was that. And because many times when we feel like we are helpless to something, at least my experience, it can bring us to a place of a deeper learning about ourselves. And why am I using this in this way? What am I trying to fill? What void, right? What is this hole, and what do I need? And it's not food, because no matter how much food I ate, it was never filling that void. And so it was looking at what parts of myself really wanted wanted to be looked at. So yeah, food is an interesting one for a lot of people when their relationship with it can really actually be a spiritual thing for many people.
Yeah. Was there like a specific moment where you were like, I need to look at this more closely and take charge? Or was it just kind of a more natural progression?
I think that, I mean, I knew that I had issues with food and, my body image for many, many years, but at an acceptable level where it never felt like it was unmanageable or I was needed to get, support, but it was still consuming from the time I was young. If I look at journals that I wrote when I was in high school, pretty much all of them talk about how fat I am and how ugly I am and how no one will ever want me and I'm unlovable and I'm disgusting. It's really sad. But that was in my head. That's how I lived. And it wasn't until I actually got into the fitness industry and for a multitude of reasons, but one of the big reasons is because I really wanted to be able to change my own physique. And I found power in that. And then it's like a double-edged sword. On the one hand, I found a lot of power in this new way of living and being. And there was performance that was exciting me. And it was not as much about, I actually was feeling confident in myself for the first time with being able to do things from an athletic standpoint. And the other, the double-edged sword is that you're in a very toxic environment where everybody really just cares about how they look, at least in the environment that I was in at that time. And so then this focus is still purely on my aesthetics and how that is my life. But it wasn't until I was in a really tumultuous relationship. And in that relationship, I started to binge eat in a way that I'd never experienced before, where it really just felt completely out of my control. And I ended up leaving that relationship and moving away, and like totally a dark night of the soul moment for myself. And that is when I started my journey of like getting help and seeking out therapy. But it was actually kind of a 5-year journey of working on my health and nutrition and going back to school to study the psychology of eating and all of that, because I wanted to then help people because I had transformed so much and there were so many parallels in that way. But yeah, so it was a lot of things, and food for me and the way I was using it was like a side effect of a much bigger issue.
Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of like like everybody knows that they should be eating more healthy, but for some reason it's always so hard to do. And it's, until we uncover those deeper causes for them, only then can we really start making the changes, even though on a cognitive level, we know that we should be doing better. If the emotion is kind of driving the car in that moment.
Emotion drives everything is what I've realized in my life. Like that is what's driving all of our lives all the time. And it's about learning yourself and learning your emotional, what your emotions are telling you.
Yeah.
And also being able to have some kind of take some space from your emotions, like being that observer of yourself rather than being wrapped up in it is such a skill to cultivate that really helps.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to bring up a quote that's on your website, which really captivated me, and I was hoping you would have some insight. It says, "Ever since I was a little girl, I've been on a quest to understand the inner workings of human beings and what makes them either stray away from their magic or fully embody it to live a purpose-driven life." So, referencing your little girl, what have you discovered since that time? And do you feel like that there is a magical answer?
I think the answer is very individual. I don't think there's one answer. I can speak for myself, and especially why ever since I was a little girl, I was fascinated by people and like what makes them stray away from who they are or embody this, magical being and their gifts. And a lot of that has to do with my own trauma. I had, my father, unfortunately he was an alcoholic, and he was an overeater, and he ended up passing away of a heart attack when he was only 54 and I was 16. And I just watched him suffer so much. And he was this beautiful, talented musician. He had 3 Grammy Awards. Like he was just like one of the most spectacular artists, but he was suffering on the inside for so many years and never worked on that part of himself, never did the inner work. And so I just watched that decline. And so that is part of what my fascination was with people. And my mom, she suffered from mental illness from the time I was 10. And she's also a very gifted, very spiritual person who, through just, I mean, I don't know exactly why she, strayed away so much from her own gifts and, but she was overwhelmed by life and her own trauma from her past. And so it was a lot for me around trying to figure people out. Like, here are these amazingly gifted people, my parents, and they can't enjoy their life. And now one's gone. And so I've always just been someone who watches people and sees how they maneuver, how they interact. And I've been able to read people. And I do think that there is a superpower that comes with having a lot of trauma. And that is the gift of being able to read energy in people, because you get very sensitive to energy from a young age when you've gone through a lot. So it sort of turns up your senses. And to answer your question about, is there a magic answer for how people can be in their magic? I think it's what we're talking about, which is learning who they truly are and not straying away from the shadow, not straying away from their trauma, really fully looking at all of it as making you a whole human being and being able to go into what your truth is. And that's different for each one of us. And following that is really hard in the world we live in, when we're constantly being bombarded by, you need to do it this way. You need to look this way. You need to eat this way. You should be here at this age, right? So all those messages that we receive, it's very challenging to be able to clear out that noise and go inward and get in touch with you, like the essence of who you are and what actually makes you feel good. But I think that when you can kind of see through all the BS and you give yourself permission to do that, and you surround yourself with other people, and especially community is so important, other people who can support each other in that way, it can help you kind of distill down to like the core of who you really are. And then the other piece of it that I think for me in particular, and I do suggest this to a lot of clients, is following your curiosity. There is a real magic in just following, like, oh, I'm really curious about this. Oh, I want to try this. And then not being straight away because, oh, that's not cool, or I'm never going to like be good at that, or what's that going to give me? Like, I prevented myself for so many years from doing anything because I was like, well, what's the payoff? Like, why should I even do that if I don't know that it's going to make me more money, or it's going to make me feel better or be cooler or whatever, right? And so now I'm like, if I want to read a book about fairies, I'm just going to read a book about fairies because I'm curious about it. It makes me happy. And so I think there's that piece of it's really important.
Yeah, you said so many things that really resonate, especially for where I'm at right now in my own journey. We're kind of in between careers. We just moved out of Canada, living here in Costa Rica, and there's just so many things in motion. And I keep feeling the push-pull of needing to do something concrete that brings something specific to the world, that generates money, so that we can live. And yeah, just kind of like trying to rebuild a business that's contained within a box, which is what I'm used to doing. But instead, I am discovering that I can do so many different things that pique my interest. I can learn to play the flute. I can take a drawing class. I can have my meditation practice. I can still work on our business a few hours a day if I need to. I can start a podcast. I can still love photography. I can do all of these different things, and they can all be part of who I am. And that's where I feel like most powerful, is when I own all of these interests and all of these things that I can do, is when I feel I'm my most authentic self and when I feel most centered and happiest as well.
Yeah, that's important to listen to yourself. And it is really easy to get distracted when you listen to a podcast and there's someone, of, let's say, a Tony Robbins caliber who's saying you cannot, I'm not quoting him directly, but just using him as a placeholder, like you can't be a jack of all trades and a master of none. You need to focus on your craft and honing that. And that's what's going to really get you there. And it's like when you hear things like that, and of course, we just live in this society of wanting to be highly successful. And that's going to give you all of the things. That's the illusion that no matter how many times I'm aware of the illusion, I'm still caught up in the illusion. No matter how many times, I'm like, it's such an interesting thing to know that it really doesn't get you anything. And yet you still are like, let me just keep going. Let me just, because maybe I'm different. But no.
No. Yeah, that's something that, as I do this podcast and I share more about my journey, it's a good reminder to just be mindful of how the message is delivered, because the path is so unique to every person. And, for me, I would never want to impose the way that things have worked out for me on someone else. Be like, sell your house, move here, quit your job, do this. It's everybody has their own journey. And I think it's important to be respectful of other people's journeys, and also have that grace towards ourselves in that the journey is not linear and it's going to have its bumps along the way. And it's sometimes going to go backwards and forwards, and all of it is good. There's no right or wrong.
Yeah, that's been a real lesson for me as a practitioner, is making sure that I'm not projecting my own stuff on the client. It's something you have to really be cognizant of, because of course, like I've had my own major journey, and there's all I can see, there's all these parallels between myself and this person. But it's really understanding that they are on their own unique path always. And so, it's okay to share a little bit, and have that commonality, but to impose certain ideas because they may have worked for me may not be the best thing for that person. And so that's been an interesting thing for me to look at, especially this last year, as I'm now doing this again, more full time, is just being aware of myself in that way. Like, oh, maybe don't say anything about that. Just let them just be with themselves, because we have our answers. They're inside of each one of us.
Yeah. Another important reminder too is that the work is never finished. You're a coach now who has been, on this journey for a long time now, but I'm sure, your own journey just keeps evolving, and there's always like more and more layers, to peel away at and more things to uncover. I know that's been the case for me for sure.
Oh yeah, 100%. I've definitely been on a roller coaster myself in this last year, because, I quit my job. I moved to the mountains. I completely changed my life that I had for 11 years. So everything right now is new for me. And I recently shared on my last podcast that I truly feel like I died and that I am reborn. That person who I was back in Philadelphia, which is where I lived before we moved to Boulder, Colorado. I don't even know who that person was. It's a really, really bizarre. The way I think and the way I perceive and the way I receive, everything feels different. And so I'm getting to actually know my new self right now.
Have you felt yourself go through that process before? Or is this kind of like the first time you really feel this death rebirth in yourself?
I was thinking about that prior to this podcast, and I believe this will be the third. And then I did the timeline, and it is 7-year cycles. And I'm like, oh, that is really interesting. I'm not no astrology expert, but a lot of astrologists will talk about these 7-year cycles. And when I did the math, I was like, oh, wow. Okay. 18, 19, 25, 33. I'm like, those are 7-year cycles.
Beautiful. Yeah. It's funny. Just before we started recording, I was listening to one of the coaches on Fit for Service, which is the mentorship I've been part of all year, was talking about her own death portal, she called it, and just the kind of the cycle that she's going through at the moment. So it definitely feels like it's there for a lot of people right now, even in the men's circle that I host. A lot of the guys, are expressing that they're going through this like big change, and it's bringing up a lot of anxiety, and it's this transition from the old to the new. It's very uncomfortable for a lot of people.
It is really uncomfortable because it feels like you're pushing up against this edge and you don't know like what it even is. It really does feel like like you're making your way out of the birth canal. Like it's tight, it's uncomfortable, it's stressful, you're anxious, you don't know what's on the other side, but you're also excited because you know that there is this light that you're stepping into, but that light is also what kind of responsibility comes with that. What's that going to be? Who's going to be there? And I've been able this time around in this process to have a really different awareness with myself. I think that comes with age and what I've been through in my past, but this rebirth has come with I'm completely the seer of it all while it's happening. So that's been really interesting for me.
That's awesome. I mean, I'm kind of like, I'm on the other side of the funnel, where you've gone through the squeeze and things are starting to open up right now. And as they come to me, I'm like, I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm sort of in that phase, but at the same time, it's like excitement for all the things that it could be. It's an interesting place, especially as the observer, to just like sit there and watch things happen and unfold. I'm enjoying it / terrified at the same time most days. Hello again.
Hi there.
How you doing?
Good. How long was your power out?
You know what? It did last a couple hours, so
wow.
I wouldn't wait around. Yeah. Sometimes it's like 30 seconds, and it comes right back. Sometimes it's hours on end. So.
Oh my gosh, you just have to, you're in that jungle living now. You never know.
Yeah, you can't fight it. You can't be mad at it. You're like, I've chose to live here and to have a more simple life. So this is all part of it.
I love when I'm on calls with Davina and I hear monkeys in the background. Yeah. It's awesome because that's one of the highlights from our trip to Costa Rica. We've only been once, but was that just being around all that wildlife and hearing monkeys. And I remember 6 a.m, this torrential downpour and just hearing the monkeys. And it was just that I will never forget. It was just so visceral.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things to hear is to wake up at 5:30, 6 a.m, and hear those howlers. The first time I heard it when we were here last November, scared the shit out of me. I was like, what is this predatorial animal in the bush, and then it's cute little monkeys.
I know, they're so loud. I think you could hear them from a mile away or something.
Yeah. And they communicate, the different groups communicate from within the hills.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're super cute. When you see them up close and they're, they seem very gentle too with humans. Yeah. There's a nice light rain outside right now, and I can feel a bit of that fresh breeze coming in. It's super nice.
Nice. Awesome. It's 35 degrees here, and there was some snow dusting. It's really weird weather. We've been having it was 75 yesterday and then 25 this morning with snow. And this week is supposed to be 15 low, 50 high on any given day. It's very bizarre living in the mountains like this.
Yeah, I saw your Instagram story that was referencing the crazy swings.
Yeah, well, that's what they say about Boulder. Stay weird, Boulder. That's apparently a saying here, and I'm here for it. So stay weird, Boulder.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, the break gave me a chance to just listen to the first half of our conversation and kind of see if there was anywhere that I wanted to keep taking the conversation. To be honest, I love how it was turning into a conversation around mindfulness and spirituality, because they are so intertwined with, with nourishment and diet and body image and all of those things. The last thing we were talking about, I'm not sure where it cut off for you, but I was kind of talking about being on the other side of the funnel, where things are starting to open up again and you don't quite know what that's going to turn into, but it's all very exciting and terrifying at the same time. And there's a lot of talk, in the personal growth journey about the shadow and the difficult things and bringing up the trauma. But can you speak a little bit about what happens when you're on the other side, when things start to open up again, you're seeing the light and things are very exciting, but there's a lot happening at the same time. Do you have any advice or anything you can offer once you're sort of on that other side?
Yeah, I think we were talking about how you can feel like a completely different person when you come out the other side of that funnel, and it's like a rebirth that happens. So for me this last year, I've been getting to know like a new version of myself. And I can really only speak for myself because I think that it's just so individual how each one of us deals with our own personal journey. And I just, for the first time, have less expectation of myself than I've ever had before, which is I'm seeing this as a good thing because it's so much more playful and there's so much room for whatever opportunity wants to present itself in whatever way feels best for me at that time, versus before I always tried to control scenarios and situations and kind of my destiny. And that was a lot of based off of being scared. It was a lot of, living from a place of fear and not really living from a place of love. And so I'm now just kind of learning what is it like to live from that other place of loving myself and being unconditional with that love. Looks a lot different. And I think that I don't know if I have any advice or like, per se. It's just more sharing my own experience with what I've noticed is happening. And it's, there are so many opportunities, and yet I'm not getting weighed down by having to choose any one and have that be final for me. Even when it comes to groups of friends, right? I've opened myself up to hanging out with different people and spending time with people that I would have never explored before. And even in that's fluid. Perhaps that only lasts for a short time and then that will fall away and I'll go to another, place. And just being really open-minded right now is at least what I've seen at that journey of coming out the other side. It's like, okay, there's all this room for play now.
Yeah. It's something that I still struggle with. Like I think everybody's creative in their own ways, and I keep getting ideas for things I want to execute or things I want to bring into this world, but I can't just like sit back and surrender and be like, if it happens, it happens. At some point there is some concrete action that you do have to take in order to bring those things to life. And that's kind of where my doubt creeps in a little bit. I'm like, oh, well, should I do this? But that means, and then I see kind of like the trickle effect of like taking that, going this avenue and all the ways that it could benefit or, hinder my life. And then I move on to the next thing and I do the same exercise. And I'm almost like stuck in this loop these days.
Yeah, I can relate to that a lot, being someone who was so driven, and I still consider myself a very driven, ambitious person. And I am actually right now in the very beginning stages of starting a brand new business within a year of leaving an 11-year business. So it's like, there's something there that says I still want to be in that frame of mind of creation and bringing and actually having something, some form that this takes, right? Not just have ideas, but actually take an idea and make it into something. But what I noticed is when I first left my business, I was almost feeling like desperate, like what's next? I need to find the thing. And it was interesting to watch that desperation and how I was acting and how I was feeling almost worthless without having this external thing to make me feel validated in this world. And so that was a real spiritual lesson for me, and looking at that and being like, wow, so are you not okay unless you have this thing to show for that, you feel powerful with? And so I learned a lot through just watching myself and the actions or even lack of action I was taking because I was all over the place. And so I understand that completely. And what I kind of started to learn is that I would have all these ideas and I would start to do some of them. And then there would be so much anxiety that I was feeling around them. And I was talking myself in and out of it, in and out of it. And I kind of took that as this sign of it's not the path. You're forcing something. You're trying to make something happen when that's not necessarily what is meant to happen for me. And this current endeavor that I'm in, has been a different experience because I found that I'm not attached to it, but I'm really excited about it, but I'm not feeling any of that desperation energy. And so I've just been paying attention to how I react and interact with different ideas and where my drive lies, and not fighting something that I think I should be doing, because it just wasn't seeming to work out. I was like, there's all this resistance and push for a reason. Maybe I should listen to that, and I should just let go and take my time and see what idea feels a little bit more fluid, rather than like I'm like trying to push my way through it.
Yeah. There's also, for those who are just kind of working on themselves right now and not doing anything, it's, I think the working on ourselves is just as helpful for the world as, going out and creating something. So I'm guilty.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of, falling into that trap where I'm just like working on myself. And I'm like, I'm not doing anything for this world. It's just like this brainwashing of like needing to be like productive and create things and like produce and deliver and have something to show for. But that's only because we're programmed to think that way. It's not actual truth.
Absolutely. Yeah. And during this whole last year, really working on myself so hardcore, I was also trying to again push my way into new endeavors because of that attachment I had to having something to show for. And there was such a mismatch in those energies. That was also part of it. It's like, you can't be in this healing process and expect yourself to have all this creativity and all of this expansion to start going into the next thing. And then learning a lot about myself and what you're talking about. Just so much brainwashing has happened, and so much protecting ourselves through what we do and how we look to the world, and seemingly how we're looking to ourselves, right? Like being able to check this box of like, okay, I have this, this, and this going on in my life, so therefore I'm doing a good job, even though I might not be fulfilled or feeling connected, but I'm still like seemingly doing a good job. And it's losing that attachment that I toggle back and forth with on a weekly basis. I do not claim for that to be completely out of my life or gone. And it's something that I am just very aware of now more than ever before.
Yeah. And to go back to food, it works that way for me as well. I'll go to the gym and I'll do yoga, and then I'm like, oh, good job. Now you can like, have a little more chocolate, and it's instead of like looking at what do I need, like what does my body need, like, being very, real about these things. It's always like the interplay of like good versus bad.
Yeah. Well, I think we are creatures of pleasure. And I think that's something we need to really honor. Is, of course, you want to have chocolate. Of course, you want to take another hour off and procrastinate the work that you have to do, right? Like, we are creatures that experience pleasure through food, through play, through sex, right? And so it's no wonder that we resist some of these things that aren't giving us that feeling of pleasure and that, that dopamine release that feels just so good for us. There is a balance though, right? And we're in an era. I was just, I've been really fascinated around technology and how it's changing our brains and our behavior, especially with social media and people doing the, mindless, endless scrolling, and just reading about how that changes the dopamine in your brain to be releasing so much of it that there's this imbalance, because we're supposed to actually have, a dopamine release, but then your brain corrects that. So there's going to be a come down after this. It tries to go to homeostasis. So if you're pumping out the dopamine, it's going to have an even harder come down because it has to balance it out. So I find that really interesting, especially when I think back to when I was binging, on food, and it's like so much pleasure releasing sugar, high amounts, and then, how I would feel after that. Right. So it is about finding that balance in your life and honoring that of course you're going to want those things. So how can you incorporate those things and make them a little bit more of a like a ritual for yourself? And I've been talking a lot with my clients lately about turning routine into ritual. You're going to do these things anyways. You're going to eat the chocolate, right? You're going to take a shower. But is there anywhere that you can have a little more of a mindful practice in that moment of, my husband and I, we never blessed our food before. And recently I've been really honoring this process of taking a moment and just looking at the food and blessing the food. And that kind of is a pattern interrupt, just that right there, before I just go and I just scarf the food down really fast, right? There's a moment of like, oh, here I am. Look at this plate of food. Wow. It took this animal to die to make this, and it took these carrots to grow, and it took this lettuce. And so I think that can be really helpful to kind of ground.
Yeah, absolutely. This is slightly embarrassing, but it is a ritual. Davina and I have been watching The Bachelor, Bachelorette, Bachelor in Paradise, all three, for many years now. And it's pretty much like the only like bad TV that we watch anymore. But it's on a weekly basis, and without commercials, it's an hour and 24 minutes. And we'll smoke a little joint and watch that and eat a little bit of chocolate. And but we do approach it almost like in this like ritualistic way, where we're like, ooh, tonight is going to be like a bachelor night, and we're going to do this. Yeah. And we really like allow ourselves to like enjoy it, like completely guilt-free, and that's super helpful for us.
I did not consent.
Davina's in the background saying
it's okay. I watch plenty of bad television still, and it's actually been something that I've been weaning myself off of over the last couple of years. And I have a different outlook on some of these shows now that I used to just watch mindlessly, and really used a lot of these shows to anesthetize myself and just be numb out, because my life for so long was jam-packed and I was on all the time. And so when I would get home, I would just completely want to numb myself out. And so there's still some of those habits are still things that I'm so aware of now in a different way. But yeah, my husband and I have plenty of, bad TV that we will indulge in. But we were just talking about how challenging it even is to sit down and watch a movie and be completely present in that, versus we just went to a movie theater for the first time since pre-COVID. And it was like so exciting, and you're present and you're there, and it's like this thing. And I said, well, we can do this at home too. We just need to make it more of, we are going to be watching this movie, your phone goes away. Let's, have some popcorn and actually make it again, more of this like ritual that we partake in. And I think that there's something really special in that for all of us right now. And in this era of like, there's so much technology and we're so distracted all the time. And that's part of the reason why we're just not even present with our food. We're not even present with how's my body feeling? What does it need? Because we're just not there.
Yeah. The one thing I will say about The Bachelor and Bachelorette is I feel like the level of like spirituality and mindfulness and awareness that we see in the participants has been like increasing year after year. And for me, it's almost like not a comfort, but like it's an encouraging sign to see how, humanity is progressing, because there's more and more conversations like about awareness or about self-awareness and about like personal growth and all that. And if you can see it on ABC and on The Bachelorette, like, like the world is kind of moving forward on some level for sure.
I felt the same way because I watched The Real Housewives, and there were two different franchises, and they both had shamans come into the group and do like a healing. And, I don't know where this person's from. I don't know, like, how legit they are, but just for that to even be shown to the masses of that they're doing this alternative healing practice, and they're, sharing with each other about what they want to surrender, what they want to call in. They're getting emotional. They're really being in their feelings. And I'm like, this is interesting, or am I just creating my own reality? And now, now that I am in a different place, even my reality shows are changing with me. I was thinking about that because I am a big believer in that, we are creating our own reality here. So I'm like, wow, that is very true. What is
Having
happening?
said that, you're not getting like your own version of Real Housewives. I'm not getting my own version of The Bachelorette,
Very
so for sure, millions of other people are seeing the same thing.
Yeah.
So for more concrete steps, like what can someone do to start eating more healthy or to be more mindful when it comes to food?
I think having knowledge is really powerful when it comes to understanding what humans eat. I always this is where I start with people. Like, if a panda is eating bamboo, okay, you are a human. What are you supposed to be eating? And it gets really confusing when you go into the very minute details of, do I eat meat? Do I not eat meat? Do I eat, more high fat? Do I not eat fat? Right. And that stuff I'm taking off the table. We're just simply talking about what foods are going to be able to assimilate in your body, be used for fuel and for energy in your system. And that's real food from nature. So, if it was alive, basically. So living foods. At one point, this food was alive, whether it was a plant or an animal, but there was a energy quality to it that was living. And versus, I think of what's the word I'm looking for? Food that's like made in a factory. Processed food. Wow. Processed food to me is like dead food, basically. So, and products. I'm like, those aren't even foods, they're just products. So thinking of processed food as products might as well be shampoo. And real food, whole foods is really where you want to start. So for anyone who's just starting on the journey of figuring out healthy eating, it's about eating real food that came from nature and just understanding what these foods do for you, getting into the science of it, geeking out over it a little bit. Why are greens so good for you? What is chlorophyll? Wow, it gets energy from the sun, and that is going into me, and that creates more energy in my body because everything we eat is really creating that vibration. So it's what is the vibration of your food? Because you can affect your own vibration through that. So that is where I started to really, for my own journey of eating well, I started to geek out over that stuff. Like, holy moly, that's pretty incredible that what you're eating is making me. So I can make those choices. So that's really that's the first place to start. Not even worrying about how much am I eating, what exact of the macronutrients am I having. That stuff I think can kind of deter people and steer them away from just making sure that they're eating real whole foods.
Especially as a first step, once things become too complicated, that's when your mind shuts off and it's like, it's like this, I'm not gonna do it. But if you can keep it simple and just eating food that is or was alive is definitely a good way to do it. It's so funny that we were talking about that because the interruption or the noise in the background is our weekly box delivery from the local farm that brings us, all of this delicious, nutritious food that was alive 24 hours ago. Just the synchronicity and the timing of things.
That's awesome.
It's beautiful.
Right. Yeah. And and farm shares, which are, everywhere, are a great way to also increase just a variety. If you're used to, eating the same fruits and vegetables, depending on where you are, where I am, seasonally things change. So, the CSA in the winters, we look a lot different than the CSA in the summer, which is kind of cool. So it just makes you have variety and eat seasonally when you do that, which is really helpful. And, in different practices in Chinese medicine, in Ayurveda, there is a lot with eating in alignment with nature and with the seasons and with where you are, so that you're adapting to that place. And we are a part of nature. So thinking of yourself as just an extension of that, of the land, and being one with that area it just makes you feel healthier. It's hard to explain, but it's a tangible feeling when you are eating more seasonally like that. So there's another place for people to kind of look at, am I having a kiwi in the winter, in Colorado coming from New Zealand? It's a little strange. And also thinking about the environmental impact as well. So that stuff uh, can be useful to think about.
Yeah, for sure. I think again, it comes back to mindfulness, around how we shop for food and where it comes from and what we put into our bodies. And that extends to cooking as well. Like I notice a difference when I'm cooking mindfully versus not. Like the quality of the dish that I'll prepare is far superior when I'm present with the food and with the cooking process, and I'm interacting with it in a way that I'm really present with it versus distracted on my phone doing other things at the same time. Like the food is just not going to taste as good.
Yeah, putting intention into your food is definitely important. And there's definitely a school of thought around that intentionality in, who's making your food and what kind of energy they have and where they was somebody angry and pissed and doesn't care and they're cooking you food. Do you want that meal, or would you rather have a meal that was made with a lot of love and a lot of reverence for the food and someone who's really enjoying what they're doing? Those things might not be so easy for everyone to pick up on, but it's definitely the more that you sort of eat real food and kind of cleanse your system, those nuances, you can kind of feel things like that over time. If something feels supportive and loving versus this food feels a little angry and rushed.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say that, that's the place to start. And then the other piece of it, which is like, how much do I eat? What do I eat? Should I be eating more protein? That is very bio individual. People are all different. We have different genetic makeups. We come from different parts of the world. If, my husband's, Southeast Asian, he metabolizes food differently. I am Eastern European. So there are differences in what foods we thrive on. That is just experimentation. Learn about your ancestry a little bit and what did your ancestors eat? Because there's probably a lot of key information there that to help you figure out what you might digest best and metabolize best and make you feel the best. So that's a place you can kind of look at, go on a little treasure hunt of what did my ancestors live off of, and play with that a little bit. Like I do really well on potatoes. I realize I'm like, that could be with every meal I could have potatoes, but I don't do as well on rice. Rice really affects my digestion. My husband, he could live off rice. He can have that with every meal. And you just kind of notice those things. And one of the ways you can notice them is your poop. And I talk about this with all my clients. I'm like, you got to start looking in the bowl and seeing like, what's the quality of your bowel movements. Are you going regularly, and do different foods affect it? That's a great way to kind of dissect your own like nutrition and what you need. And then how much you need, portion wise for people. Again, that really is individual on how much is someone moving, right? Are they an athlete? They may need a lot more to sustain that kind of energy versus someone who's more sedentary. And I am not someone who ever tells people to count calories, although for some of my athletes, I will use that as just some key information in the beginning of working with someone to kind of find like what the sweet spot is for them. And they can use like, a tracking app and their Apple Watch, if they have one, to kind of see like how much energy expenditure is actually happening for this person. I've seen for many women in particular tend towards eating too little and they're working out too much. And there's a mismatch of energy expenditure versus how much energy they're taking in. And the body does not like that. It's going to try to hold on to what it can. And so you may not feel the best. You might feel more sluggish in your workouts, or you might actually feel that you're not seeing a physical result that you would think you would from the amount of exercise you're doing. So those are like little tweaks and things. It depends on the person, but I'm more so with nutrition, all about how it's making you feel physically from a performance standpoint, and also from a mental health standpoint, because your gut and your brain are so linked. And, your dopamine and serotonin are in your gut. Those are key chemicals that are in our gut. And 70% of our immune system is also in our gut. So the gut's kind of like the power center for how we feel.
Yeah, there's a lot more conversation around gut health, I feel, in the last couple of years. It keeps coming up and everywhere that I look. Yeah.
Yeah. Healthy microbiome, pretty much healthy life.
Yeah.
It's what's coming down to with the more and more research that's being done on this. It's pretty amazing to see just how much impact the microbiome has on health, and in particular, seeing poor health and the obesity epidemic that we're in, and seeing that that's so linked to the gut and the bacteria that resides in the gut, and that bacteria really changes from processed food, right? Chemicals and preservatives, and also just pollutants as well. Like, are you living in a big city and you're eating a ton of processed food and fast food, and the microbiome's probably not going to be so happy.
Yeah. I get this newsletter every week that's like good news of the week, and for the most part it's wonderful. It's like such a breath of fresh air to get positive news instead of the gloomy mainstream stuff. But one of them this week was about the amount of plant-made meat that's being produced, and how like this factory is like increasing its capacity to deliver factory-produced meat. And I was like I'm not like, I get the like correlation to like the gases that are being emitted and all that, but that's kind of where I feel like humans sometimes take things a little bit too far the other way, and like the pendulum swings a little bit too much.
Yeah. I mean, we're in a capitalistic society, and it's following the trends of what are people buying and what's going to make money. And even something like a plant-based burger, I'm seeing plastered all over even fast food chains right now. The Impossible Burger, is here. And so, people are quick to jump on whatever trend they think is going to make them healthier. And it's by no fault, of anyone's, other than the fact that we, again, going back to brainwashing, we are extremely brainwashed by the media, and it's, controlling what many people are buying. Yeah. And I really think that we have to take more of a stand for our own, have more agency for each one of our journeys of health, and not just rely on, oh, plant-based is good. Okay, cool. I'm going to eat plant-based now. But why? Like doing your own research and looking into why is that good for me, and seeing how it feels for you, and not just jumping on every single thing because someone says like, this is going to be the answer. Everyone's always looking for that magical thing that's going to bring them, to the place of losing weight or feeling better, So yeah, I think that we have to just take a little more agency over that stuff.
That's great advice for sure. What's your take on intermittent fasting?
This is another one that's kind of like, on the scene, and it's great when things come on the scene. I'm not saying that every single thing that comes up is like, oh, you should be weary of it, but I'm always questioning, because if you see throughout the years, there are trends. I mean, there was a big raw food movement back in like 2010 or 2012 that I jumped on at the time. And then, gluten-free became such a big thing over the last decade. And then keto is now such a big thing that you're seeing. And then the intermittent fasting is, but these are valid ways of choosing to eat and seeing if they work for you. And it's not that they are unhealthy or quote unquote bad. It's just you should learn a little bit about what is the actual benefit, because many people choose these plans simply because they want to lose weight, is what, in my experience of working with a lot of clients, is they want that thing that's finally going to make them look better. And they equate that to a better life. So I have a whole like thing around just the psychology of that. And it's like, the body is ever changing, and to be so attached to it, this perfect form that we're trying to achieve, and for what, right? Because of the messaging that we've received around that thinness or this physique is going to then allow you to have an easier life or a better life. So I just bring that up because when you're looking at any of these things, what's your why around doing it? Because if it is just like, I want to look better, there are, a lot of different things you could do. But with intermittent fasting, to me, intermittent fasting is definitely more for health and to support somebody's digestion and give their body more opportunity to heal, because the body can't really digest and heal all at the same time. It takes a lot of energy to do both of those things. And so giving your digestion a break is a good idea for all of us. For me personally, I do a 12-12 most days. And that's just, all right, give myself 12 hours of not having to digest anything. And then there's 12 hours of eating. And it's very natural to do a 12-12. I have not myself gone into like, a 16-hour fast and I've yet to even do a 24-hour in a long time, other than maybe when I was a kid, because with Jewish holidays. and I probably didn't make it, to be honest.
I hated those. I was like, oh no, it's the holiday where we don't eat.
Yeah, exactly. But there's also something to fasting that there's a spiritual component, right? If you look at many religions, there's fasting involved. And there's something about being able to abstain from that pleasure that food gives us that allows you to go inward and kind of deal with yourself. And it's like the way that COVID for many people, it allowed this different introspection to happen because all of a sudden they weren't as distracted. They weren't having to go anywhere. And so fasting can do that. And it kind of makes you face this part of yourself that always wants to make yourself feel better and always just wants to like put, hand to mouth, right? I think you mentioned that in the beginning of our episode, just this fixation, sometimes just a mouth thing. Sometimes it's not even, your body doesn't actually need as much as we think it does. It's just, we get fixated on that pleasure that comes from food. So I think that there's something in fasting that's beyond the health benefits, which there are to help your body heal. There's a benefit with the spiritual practice of being able to abstain from something in that way. And it builds this strength inside of you that I believe is really important for a lot of us. This is why I'm with the fasting thing, the more and more that I learn about it, it's less for me about, it's going to be really healing. It's more for me about, it's going to be really good for my mental fortitude and what I'm capable of. It's kind of like Vipassana doing, silent retreats. It's that same thing of like going inward and just dealing with yourself without any external pleasures to distract you from you.
Yeah. Can you hold that emotion or the feelings that come up, as you have that craving for food, can you sit there and be with whatever wants to come up that you would normally just numb and throw something in your mouth?
Yeah. And for anyone who has had disordered eating, especially, binging like I did, so much of what I was doing was trying to push down those feelings that were trying to come up in such a big way that I had to like stuff them down. That's really a metaphor. I think that how we eat, how we live, I often say how we do one thing is how we do probably a lot of things in our life. And just seeing a theme for yourself in how you operate can teach you a lot about what are you trying to not look at.
Yeah. Davina and I have been intermittent fasting. We do 16-8 most days, and we've been at it for, I don't know, probably about a year, maybe even a little bit longer now. And it has gotten easier over time, but there's still, some days where we just don't feel like doing it, or we listen to our body and our body is actually lacking food and we do need to, eat a little bit more that evening or break our fast a little bit earlier in the morning. But for anyone who's curious to try it, I do recommend it. And after a week, your body is used to not eating anymore, right before bed. And I mean, I think that's pretty universal for most people. The 2-3 hours before bedtime we should abstain from food so that we can sort of do the top digestion and go to bed without our body working so hard to move the food through us.
That's why I think 12-12, if someone doesn't want to go into the 16-8 and kind of go that next step, 12-12 is sort of just, it's totally natural and really doable for pretty much everyone to try that without feeling scared of, oh no, I'm not going to be, because really it just means go to sleep, have a couple hours before bed, go to sleep, and don't eat. Probably not going to eat the first thing when you wake up. And most people don't want to eat the first thing when they wake up anyway. So it's a more natural way of trying it if you want to give it a shot.
Yeah. So we're about to wrap this up. There's a couple of questions I like to ask my guests. I think it's super interesting. What is the day in the life of Juliet, or do you have a daily practice that you want to share with us?
Sure. Well, there's a couple of things that I do pretty much every day, and one of them is movement. I just love to exercise. I am a very high energy person. I always have been. And I feel like it's like, you've got to run me around like a kid or a dog. I have to run around until I get tired and relax. So just knowing that about myself, super high energy. I do a very vigorous exercise practice almost daily, where I am just sweating and like grunting and getting it out of my system. But it's not the same every day. Sometimes it's a run. Sometimes it's lifting weights. Sometimes it's Pilates. I kind of just vary it and base it on how my body's feeling that day. And use my intuition around kind of what workout am I going to do. And then meditation is something that's been really powerful for me in my practice daily. And I actually meditate after I work out. So I sort of like get all this energy out of my body and I'm completely released. And then I'm able to get even deeper into a meditation practice. And that is also very intuitive in which meditation I'm going to do for that day. There are some meditations where I want to go purely try to get into the void and go into like nothingness. And then there are other meditations where I just intuitively sense that like I need a little more guidance. Or I want to do a manifestation kind of future meditation and go into like a place of expansion and fun and creativity. So yeah, the practices that I do are really just kind of fluid right now. I don't have any rigidity currently, which I think is a good thing for me where I'm at in my life.
It's something that I always struggled with. And today I'm on like day 10 of meditating 10 days in a row. And I struggled with it before that. And I think part of it was because I was so rigid with how, where, when I should do it. Whereas now this time I approached it with, I just want to meditate ideally twice a day, like in the morning and the evening. But if it's just once a day, that's fine. And I used to think that it had to be like first thing in the morning, wake up at 5:30 before the kids, go outside, meditate, sit there. But now I'm like way more loose with it. Like this morning, I get up, get the kids ready for school, bring them to school, went to the gym also, then came back, took a cold shower. And then like it was, 10:30 and I sat outside and did my 30-40 minute meditation. And that it's equally valuable as like the 5:30 first thing in the morning meditation. And to think that I used to think otherwise is like, it seems ridiculous to me now. But having this flexibility is what's allowing me to stick to it. And I'm on like day 10 and I know it's going to keep going because I can do it in more places at more varied times now.
Yeah. And I just think be proud of yourself. I'm proud of myself for every single meditation I do. Mm-hmm. Even if it only was 10 minutes or whoa, I did a 30-minute, or I just feel so proud of myself because there were so many years where I could not get into the routine of meditating and I resisted it so much and I would procrastinate and go, oh, well, another day where I didn't do it, or I didn't do it. It's properly. It's not the right time. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it right. I'm not getting there, So, it's just a powerful, proud moment for me every time I meditate right now. And the other thing that I do that I see as a meditation is I walk every day without fail, at least an hour a day.
Mm.
And this is like, I almost take myself on a walk like I'm walking a dog, like we're going on a walk. And I really call them my soul walks. I get so much out of them. So many ideas come through when I'm going on these walks and looking at the trees. And sometimes I'll actually connect with a tree and I'll hug a tree and I'll kiss a tree and I'll just, I have my moment just of with nature. And I'm really lucky now to not be living in a city, because I would do this before and it would just be big, tall buildings around me and dirt. And now I actually, can have mountains in the background and like all this beauty. So really not taking that for granted. And my walks have just upgraded like so much since we moved here. But that's something that is in my daily practice, like without fail, almost like every single day.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And the last question, which is something that was asked of me last year and I didn't really have an answer, and I still don't really, the definition keeps changing, but what is spirituality for you?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think I don't, what it is for me right now is connecting to something more powerful than myself that makes me feel a sense of support, that I'm supported, that I have a reason for being on this earth, that there's something larger at play, that there's magic that I can tap into. And truly believing that magic exists for me in the last couple of years of my life has been the greatest gift, because it just means that there's so many things that I can tap into that are beyond just this day-to-day life of materialism that I was caught up in for so long. Like there's a whole invisible world. What? To me, that is really exciting to be able to tap into that. So spirituality, I think, is just about tapping into that connection to something greater than myself and being aligned with what's true for me, and honoring whatever that is. So if I want to believe in magic or spells, for example, or if I want to, channel a being or whatever it may be, that has been what I am perceiving my own spirituality as, is just tapping into something that's this invisible force that just feels really fun, expansive, and nurturing and loving. And developing unconditional love for myself also has been a big part of spirituality for me.
Thank you. That was beautiful.
It's a hard one to answer, right?
It is, yeah. I love hearing everybody's answers. It's interesting to see how everybody interprets it and what it means to different people. And I think all answers are valid. There's no right or wrong.
I think that is what spirituality is, what you just said, that all answers are valid. There's no right or wrong. It's whatever your truth is for you. Mm-hmm. That is this connection to yourself and to something perhaps beyond you. And it's really powerful to tap into that, because it just feels like you can do more and experience more with that. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of your knowledge and wisdom. This was so interesting for me. And I can, like, all of this like oozes out of you. Like I can tell how much you know about nutrition and fitness and coaching and trauma and healing and spirituality. And so I'm very grateful that you agreed to come on and that we had this conversation.
Yeah. And I would love to get you on the WooCast to come onto my podcast.
It will be an honor.
So awesome. Yeah. I'll definitely reach out and we will have you on the show. I want to hear all about your own journey, especially being in Fit for Service, because I follow Aubrey Marcus and all the people in that circle. And it's so amazing. And I was just looking at the his Instagram from Sedona. I think you went to Sedona, right? And then Matthias was there.
That's right.
I had just gone to a whole Matthias weekend. Yes. So yeah, I definitely have to have you on. And like, I would love to know your whole journey.
I would love to, for sure. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so my website is rootedpower.com. And then I'm on Instagram, Juliet_root, just like the tree. So yeah, everybody can find me either my website or my Instagram.
Amazing. Thank you so much again. And I look forward to us talking again soon.
All right. Thanks, Daniel. Bye. Have a good day.
Bye, you too.